return Americans to their birthright political status, land and soil jurisdiction, through a simple paperwork process that protects them from contracting practices. The Georgia Assembly Plan. 7 Southern nation-states of America walked out of the second session of the 36th Congress on March 27, 1861. Adjournment of Congress was signed a Latin term meaning without fixed day, no day is set for reconvening. On April 15, 1861, President Lincoln reconvened Congress under the executive branch by proclamation, General Orders 100. I do hereby, in virtue of the power in me vested by the Constitution, convene both houses of Congress. This became the Lieber Code, https://Avalon. Law. Yale. edu/19th_century/Lieber. ASP. The Lieber Code requires the Army, or in modern terms, the Department of Defense, to pay reparations to all non-combatant civilians harmed. Call to session after 160 years. There are three ways that the state assemblies may be called into session. A. They may be summoned by the United States of America, our unincorporated federation. B. They may be summoned by the President of the United States of America, the same federation of states. C. A committee of 9 state assemblies may call the General Assembly. In the present instance, in the year 2020, we are now called to assemble and 50 state assemblies have answered. This has been made possible by our state coordinators, who are state national volunteers employed, but unpaid to date by the United States of America to organize and expedite the state assembly process. The Federation. The Federation of States was created very early on, September 1776, as a means for the states to act together as one body in international and global jurisdictions. The Federation has no national level powers at all and is not in itself a sovereign body. The Federation is an agency of the states representing the sovereign bodies of the states of the Union in the foreign international and global jurisdictions. In terms of business structure, the Federation is an unincorporated holding company. What it holds are the international and global powers that each of the states vouchsafed to it for their mutual defense and protection. The Federation is like a bank that holds all the delegated powers of the states, and is then the delegator of all powers subsequently delegated to the Confederation, and which is also responsible for the later delegations of powers made under the constitutions. When any of the subcontractors or even the Confederation are unable to function, all those powers delegated to them return automatically by operation of law to the Federation that made the delegation of power in the first place. In order to operate in international and global business realms, the Federation had to operate under a recognized sovereign, which is a problem because we were getting rid of sovereigns and because each individual state could not be recognized as a sovereign in international jurisdiction and still have the advantage of mutually shared powers. To get past this obstacle, the founders used the sovereign status of William Belcher, a patriot from Connecticut, who later served as a colonel in the Continental Army. Though his family acquired sovereignty in England as a result of the Norman Conquest, William Belcher, like his own forefathers, believed that people should learn to be self-governing. The Great Seals of both the United States and the United States of America are part of the Belcher coat of arms array. As a result, William Belcher and his progeny became yet another safeguard for the new American government, and the hereditary office of head of state passes down to them because every ship that sails under the Great Seals, meaning all corporations as well as all ships and all commerce taking place worldwide by American vessels. The rats have colluded to escape their obligations owed the Federation and the American states and people, by attempting to redefine us all as non-American Commonwealth entities. And they have contrived to unlawfully convert everything and everyone by a process of false registration. That is the topic and issue that we address with the declarations and other paperwork. Following the Civil War, the Belcher family was literally hunted and murdered and slandered by British and Papist interests bent on setting the current system up. They were forced to flee from the East Coast to the West Coast, which was then still a distant frontier. The Great Seals were stolen and were last seen in the possession of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. However, possession by pirates does not change ownership. The Belchers are still the protectors of the Federation on the sea and in the air. The members of the Federation are the states of the Union, and your state assemblies are the embodiment of your states when in session. Thus, the Belchers act to protect the interests of the states and people and keep the Federation alive, howbeit with a skeleton crew, when the states are not in session and they have summoned the states to assemble and take care of business and deal with the mess. It is important to note that Belcher is an anglicized version of Belcher. The family is Norman French, not British, and Belcher is a clan name like MacDonald, so it is proper to think and speak of the Belchers as a clan, and not just a clan chieftain. The actual members of the Federation are the states represented by state assemblies. The Federation continues to hold the mutual powers of all the states. The people gathered to run the Federation's administration come from all over the country and are all volunteers serving at their own risk. Some are related to the Belchers, but many are not. Many are simply Americans who came to help once the banner had been raised. Our functions have been dictated to date by past practice and necessity, all of which are practical matters, such as locating assets that belong to the states and people, which have been purloined by the federal subcontractors, and putting an end to the great fraud. In doing so, we all act under the prudent man fiduciary standard, meaning that we administer all affairs of state with the same standard we would exercise as if the assets and resources belonged to us in a private capacity. We use carriage accounting, not double accrual accounting. We use the calendar year, not the federal fiscal year. Responsibility of the Federation. Be it known to all to whom these presents come, that there is a lawful and legal means provided for Texas and every other state to assemble, and that means of lawful and peaceable assembly requires the process to take place under the authority and guidance of a recognized summoning authority. Article 3232. There are three possible summoning authorities charged with the responsibility. The first summoning authority is the President of the United States of America. This office has been vacated since 1860. The second is a quorum of nine states in session, used during recesses and temporary adjournment. The only state left in session was Texas, so no quorum was possible. The third and only remaining option is for the owner of the Great Seals to call the states into session and operate the United States of America, our unincorporated federation of states, to do it. So that is what has been done. It has fallen to the Federation, which is not the federal government, to call the states into session. That responsibility carries with it the obligation to ensure that the assemblies thus created are peaceable, and composed of qualified people living within the borders of each state, who have declared and recorded their adoption of their birthright political status, and from there, to provide the discipline, framework, and guidance to establish in each state a general assembly, a business, sometimes called international assembly, a public court, and a state assembly militia. This is a process not given to interpretation, and we have followed it to the letter. Please note that the Federation must ensure the legal and peaceable nature of the process and the state assemblies that result from it, or our activities could be mistaken as hostile actions and legally suppressed by military force. Once each assembly has been assembled, and each portion of this process has been accomplished, each assembly will be fully seated, meaning that all basic functions are in place and operating. Until each assembly is fully seated, it remains under the guidance of the Federation. That is why the Federation is involved in the state assembly process, and why it is significantly in control of this process until such time as the state leadership is fully educated, and the basic functions of American state government are restored. After such a long hiatus and so much confusion, it is understandable that a mighty educational process is necessary, even about comparatively simple things, such as the role of the Federation as the summoning authority, the role of the coordinators who act as Federation officers, not to be confused with federal officers, the structure of the state assemblies and the functions of the state assemblies. It is also understood that people will continue to be confused and need to be educated on a continuing basis as new questions and issues arise and as new people join the assemblies. We can and we must deal with this educational process as transparently and honestly as possible. None of it is rocket science. All of it is ultimately under the control of the people in each state. Anyone who feels that the Federation is being heavy-handed has a clear road to get the necessary work done, establish the structures, provide the functions, and complete the assembly process. Once fully seated, each state assembly is responsible for performing under the treaties and constitutional agreements already established and for supporting the restored American government, the reconstruction thereof, and becomes responsible for the conduct of the restored Confederation and Federal Republic. This grave responsibility also includes preserving the peace, not undermining it. Everyone concerned needs to realize that the actual federation is the only means that the people of this country must control the operations of the federal subcontractors. Because the federal subcontractors have run off track and profited themselves greatly by doing so, they don't want the states in session, and they don't want the unincorporated federation of states breathing down their necks and forcing them to abide by their constitutional obligations. As a result, certain public employees and agencies hired by them using our money, have undertaken to undermine the peaceable nature of our state assemblies and have attempted to commandeer our efforts and to misdirect the assembly process so as to create an excuse to brand our efforts as insurrectionist activities, and provide themselves with an excuse for crushing our activities with overwhelming military force. Shared responsibility. Our brand is devoted to the peaceful and lawful enforcement of the constitutional guarantees, and the protection of the lives and property rights of Texans and all other Americans. We do not, and we will not, condone or participate in any form of insurrection, rebellion, or creation of armed forces other than the lawful state assembly militias, operated as they are supposed to be operated within each state, and our land-based Continental Marshals Service, which is our jurisdictional interface with the U.S. Marshals Service. Our steady course remains, to use international law and public law to rein in the brigands and the politicians responsible for abusing the public trust, to enforce the constitutional guarantees and protections, and to do this peaceably, honorably, and lawfully via the processes and agreements established to secure these ends. Unless you wish to see this country and its people engulfed in yet another unnecessary, deliberately provoked, and self-interested civil war, you will immediately understand the necessity that prompts us to expel those who propose any other course of action. If any assembly or member of an assembly hears anyone in their assembly, or any other assembly promoting violence, preaching against the Federation as if the Federation was the de facto federal government, moving to incorporate any function of any assembly, setting up any foreign structures apart from the General Assembly, International Business Assembly, public courts, and the lawful state assembly militia, refusing to record political status of members, taking money from foreign corporations, selling information about the assemblies or assembly members, using the assemblies or assembly members for unjust enrichment, promoting Ponzi schemes, trust schemes, memberships in secret societies or otherwise remaining out of step with the simple program outlined above. You are encouraged to notify us directly, so that prompt corrective action can be taken. Use the email, avanovan@gmail.com and the subject line, Jim. We are a peaceful and effective and lawful organization. We have gained the support of the world in our efforts to restore the lawful American government. We do not intend to be undermined by persons who either don't understand, or refuse to honor the actual mission, which is the restoration of the traditional and intended American government. There may be more than one state coordinator, and in the larger states especially, it is highly recommended that more state coordinator volunteers be brought on board. When more than one state coordinator is present, the coordinators work together as a team and elect one from the group to function as lead coordinator. The lead coordinator from each state will be responsible for corresponding directly with the national coordinator in the United States of America. New coordinators are to receive instruction, including this handbook, upon completion of the necessary paperwork and vetting process. New coordinators need to learn the bottom-up structure and spirit of our actual government of, for, and by the people of this country. It is exactly opposite to the top-down structure and spirit of both the federal government and the corporations that many of us have worked for. In the assembly process we are engaged in community building. We are not building a corporation. Corporate business structures do not apply. Let us all keep that firmly in view. There are jobs to do, and functions to perform, but the principles of hierarchy and compartmentalization are largely absent. Ideally, everyone in every assembly will know all the jobs and functions, and numerous people will be ready to fill vacancies and bulwark efforts as needed. Your state assembly should resemble a family gathering, because in essence, that is what it is and what it is intended to be, an extended family of friends, relatives, and neighbors working together for their mutual long-term security and benefit. Definitions: each state assembly consists of 1. Body politic composed of all declared state nationals and state citizens living within the boundaries of each state. A. Anyone who qualifies by birthright or by legal naturalization processes and who 1. Lives in a state on a permanent basis and 2. Who declares and records their political status as a state national or state citizen must be included in the state assembly as long as they are acting in honor. Each state assembly is organized to perform 4 functions. 1. The General Assembly provides a discussion and decision forum for interstate business and acts as a committee of the whole to decide issues of general interest, conducts elections, and provides oversight for all assembly functions. 2. The International Business Assembly, which is composed entirely of state citizens, conducts the international and interstate business of the assembly. 3. The Jural Assembly provides the court services and oversees the grand jury, trial juries, officers, and functions of the courts. 4. The Assembly Militia is focused on promoting public safety within the boundaries of their state and is the well-regulated militia guaranteed to each state for its internal security. General Assembly meetings are, generally speaking, public meetings. If the General Assembly wishes to conduct any private or sensitive intrastate business, they simply divide the agenda and close that portion of the meeting, so that only state nationals and state citizens participate. All state nationals and state citizens must be allowed to attend all General Assembly meetings. Regular Assembly meetings are scheduled and posted in advance. Adoption of rules of order for the conduct of meetings is highly encouraged. Publication of an agenda at least a week prior to all regularly scheduled meetings is also highly recommended. Business assembly meetings are relatively rare events at first, but become increasingly important going forward, especially as the state of state unincorporated is established. These meetings are open to state citizens, who are the only ones with standing to vote on the international and interstate business under consideration. The Business Assembly gets its direction from the General Assembly. Jural Assembly meetings are special meetings organized by the active members of the Jural Assembly, all of whom are qualified jurors, able to serve on both the grand jury and trial juries, or officers of the courts. Assembly militias often meet before or after General Assembly meetings, but many also maintain a weekend schedule for training and to conduct exercises and conduct business unique to the militia. All able-bodied members of the Assembly between the ages of 21 and 65 are expected to actively support their militia in one way or another, either as active militia or acting in support, supply, communications, and administrative positions. In the beginning, our forefathers designed a deliberately complex and counterbalanced system of government and paid special attention to conflicts of interest. This system of checks and balances was followed at every level and step, from the foundations of our counties to our states of states, and finally, to each segment of the federal government, too. It is well to remember that at the time, there were large inclusive segments of the population built upon relationships with various European countries. We had English colonists, but also French, Protestant, and Papist, Dutch, and Spanish in the West. Building a cohesive and defensible whole out of such disparate origins and conflicts of affiliation, culture, and tradition required extraordinary measures. In the end, it was accomplished via the skillful use, and just as skillful limitation of, jurisdictional authority. Our physically defined counties control the national jurisdiction of the soil, and, taken together, define the embodiment of the combined soil jurisdiction owed to our State of the Union. Notice the small s. When we are talking about soil jurisdiction, we are talking about the state as a nation-state. Alabama is a nation-state as well as a state of the Union. Each county government is the supreme local authority, and so, the county sheriff is the supreme elected peacekeeping official. However, in keeping with checks and balances, this supreme authority extends only within the physical borders of the county, and each county has only its own state as an interface with other states and foreign countries. It is cut off from the rest of the world. This becomes important when you realize that if it were otherwise, each county could split off and ally itself with any foreign government it chose, and our country would quickly become a hodgepodge of over 3,000 disparate crazy quilt pieces, all functioning under different laws and warring with each other and using different forms of currency. Without this segregation of the soil jurisdiction, the Union would have dissolved even as it was being born. Each such county and the nation-state that the combined counties build, is populated by people, known as American state nationals. Note the small p on people. We have already seen that Americans born within the borders of a state acquire their nationality at birth, and so we become Texans, New Yorkers, Minnesotans, and so on. We remain American state nationals until the age of 21, when we can choose to act as state citizens. American state citizens. The word citizen always implies an obligation to serve some level or form of government, and it is no exception here. When we are old enough to accept the responsibility and understand the obligations involved, we become eligible to act as citizens of our State of the Union. A state citizen must be free to make decisions, impacting their state and its international relations, with other states and nations, with a clear mind and open conscience, unaffected by mixed loyalties to any other master. State citizens voluntarily occupy an office of personhood in order to serve the interests of the international jurisdiction of their State of the Union. Their lawful persons are known as people. Notice the capital P. State of the Union. What do we mean by State of the Union? Notice the capital S. The state is different and set apart from the nation-state formed by the combined soil jurisdictions of the counties. The state level of government exists in the international jurisdiction of the land and sea. It is inhabited by persons, either lawful persons or legal persons. The land jurisdiction begins 6 inches under the surface of the soil and extends to the center of the earth by definition. Land is an international resource, as it and the resources of the subsoil, mineral deposits and subsurface water, cannot observe the strict and known boundaries of the soil surface. Each state's land jurisdiction is forever connected to its soil, but the nation-state of Alabama and the state known as Alabama occupy 2 distinct and different jurisdictions, one national, one international in nature. So, Alabamans acting as American state nationals are people who populate the soil jurisdiction of Alabama, but when they choose to act in the capacity of state citizens, they operate as people, that is, lawful persons, and control the international land and sea jurisdiction of Alabama. International jurisdiction is the jurisdiction in which Alabama as a whole acts as a physically defined state of the Union and interacts with the other states and with other countries, for example, Denmark. Conflicts of interest. Our forefathers, always anxious to avoid conflicts of interest which might undermine our security, defined state citizens to be people having no other allegiance to or affiliation with any foreign state or nation. Thus, you cannot serve your state as a state citizen, and decide international questions for your State of the Union, if you have any conflicts of interest. Such conflicts of interest may include being licensed by a foreign government, receiving titles and offices from foreign governments, being employed by foreign governments, receiving unearned welfare benefits from foreign governments or other substantial gifts or emoluments from foreign governments. This includes professional licenses, titles, offices, employments, and substantial unearned welfare, substantial gifts, land, gold, etc., or other emoluments conferred by the federal government subcontractors or what we more readily recognize as foreign governments of other countries, Britain, France, etc. It follows that anyone employed by any other level of government, anyone in receipt of professional licenses issued by any other level of government, or having any other such attachment, obligation, or conflict of interest, is limited to acting as an American state national. Each state of the Union is thus populated by both American state nationals and American state citizens. Both can serve their state, both can vote in public elections for state and county offices, both inherit their nationality from their state, but when it comes to international and interstate questions, the state citizens are the only ones authorized to vote on these matters. By isolating the soil jurisdiction and giving it the supreme power over local law, the founders sought to preserve the security of the people of each nation-state. They forestalled foreign speculation and interference by giving the counties one, and only one interface to international jurisdiction, their own state of the Union. By limiting international and interstate decision-making to state citizens, they further ensured that the states would be self-interested and would not succumb to foreign interests seeking to parlay political influence or kickbacks into giveaways of state interests and assets. Next steps. Continue to grow our numbers. In the state assembly everyone is in outreach. Populate our counties, build county structure, focus group on understanding our counties, federation level work group. Assemble and train our militia. Almost everyone is in the militia. Ages 21 to 65 begin our training on first aid, disaster response. Build community/know your neighbors. Populate our jural assembly structure. Education and training is essential.